So for the biomechanics lab 5, I had to do 3 different things. I had to do a free throw in 3 different ways. One by just sitting and doing a free throw, one standing with straight legs and no follow through, and another while using all of my joints. So that includes the knees, shoulder, wrist, elbow, and my knees will be bent, and I have to do a follow through that is fully extended with my wrist like that. So I did not have a basketball, so I used a volleyball to do this, but it is still the same concept. So the factors that affected my performance was definitely the the chair height. My chair height was pretty low, so it made it even harder to really get the ball higher. I was trying to level myself up to the imaginary net, and you have to use your whole torso strength to really initiate that movement of pushing the ball upwards, because your legs cannot be initiated because you're sitting. So all you have is your torso to help you move the ball. So that was definitely one factor. Um, Another factor was because I use a volleyball. Volleyballs are a lot lighter than a basketball is, so even with a basketball, it would have been that much harder to actually do that. Also, standing with straight legs was very difficult because it's just not natural. You want to have a bend in your legs when you're shooting, because it initiates that little pop it do. Like your leg joints help your whole body just go whoop, so that it's an easier release of the ball when you go like that. So still while standing with straight legs, that was still very hard. Um, when I was using all my joints, so with my bent knees, and I had my knees, my shoulders were positioned like this, my elbow was up ready to shoot, and my wrist was holding the ball like this, and then as soon as I shot the ball like this, had a follow through with my wrist flicked, and I held it up as I watched the ball go like that. So that was definitely the best way to shoot the ball. That's the way that you're supposed to shoot a ball, because everything is engaged, and you always want to try to engage all of your muscles in your joints to complete an action, because it makes it so much more fluid. Instead of just using your shoulder strength to lift the ball up, you can use your knee joints, you can use your abdominal muscles to really push, you can use your wrist to flick, and it's just that much more effective when you engage your entire body. How does technique have a major impact in this activity? Why or why not? So once again, technique has a major impact because you are 100% better shooter if you engage your whole body. If your whole body is engaged, you will become more successful because you're lined up to the basket. Your whole body is it's like a checklist. Your elbow is up, your wrist is bent and ready to follow through. Your knees are shoulder width apart or a little wider, and your knees are bent, ready to initiate that first push of the basketball. So I'd say that one of the most major things, like apart from the arm, because that's what's doing the shooting, is the legs. Because the legs, if you're not as strong, if you're not strong enough to actually lift the basketball up, your legs will take part of that mass and help you force it upwards. So the last question, how did the applied force influence the velocity? How does this illustrate the principle of impulse? So the applied force influences velocity because I am holding the ball, and I am the applied force. I am applying my force towards this ball with my knees bent and my shoulder strength. So when I'm holding the ball, I bend my knees and I straighten my knees as I jump a little. You can jump, or you can just instead of just having your knees bent, you can just straighten them up. So knees bent and straighten and follow through. So that applied force initiates the velocity happening, because once I release the ball, velocity is reached because the ball is now traveling in midair towards the basketball from my applied force. This illustrates the principle of impulse, because impulse is the greater the applied impulse, the greater the increase in velocity. So this is a perfect example, this lab, of impulse, because the first example, when I was just sitting still, I had very low impulse. I could only do this. That's all. Just my torso was involved. But with the last example, I was able to use all of my joints, my knees, shoulder, elbow, everything was engaged. So that resulted in a greater impulse, because I had greater force that was being applied, which equaled to a greater increase in velocity.